This is CBC Here and Now.
He said, "My dear, somebody is going to die over this." Never an inkling that he would be the one.
A daughter is blaming the closure of the Bonavista emergency room for her father's death. Find out why, coming up on Here and Now.
Some of the phrases that are being used are just derogatory.
When they look at the green armband, they know, okay, he's like a junior ref, take it easy on him and be respectful.
A symbol designed to cool down coaches and curb verbal abuse on the ice. That story is ahead. Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. It's a warning we've been hearing from small communities for months that ongoing emergency room closures could have dire consequences. Well, tonight, a family in Bonavista is blaming their father's death on a 90-minute commute to Clarenville. Here and Now's Daryl Roberts has our top story.
Shelley Gosselin says she sees signs of her father, Charles Marsh, throughout his hometown.
He was full of life. At age 78, he never stopped. He always had projects on the go. He was well known to the whole area of Bonavista for his carpentry skills, and people were always calling him up to ask advice on things.
Gosselin says her father didn't have major health issues aside from asthma, and 2 Sundays ago he began having an attack.
In the past, the main thing that has helped is oxygen with steroids. And so he drove himself from his home to the Bonavista Hospital. And when he arrived there, the parking lot was empty, the doors were locked, and there was a sign saying closed until 21 February. And for emergency services, call 911. And basically for transport to Clarenville, the nearest town, which is about an hour and a half away.
Gosselin says her father called her, upset that the ER was closed.
He said, "My dear, somebody is going to die over this." Never an inkling that he would be the one.
Hoping the asthma attack would pass, Gosselin's father returned home.
Throughout the night, he got progressively worse, and in the morning, he called the ambulance. And the ambulance came after approximately 25 minutes or so, and they took him. He walked from his door onto the ambulance, and approximately an hour later, he passed away in the ambulance en route to Clarenville.
Marsh's death comes after months of protests from Bonavista residents, those worried about worst-case scenarios when the emergency room is closed.
It is a tragedy.
John Norman can't say for sure if Charles Marsh would be alive today had the local ER been open, but the Bonavista mayor has been speaking out about the ongoing closures, warning of dire consequences.
This has been a reoccurring point of concern, and unfortunately, we have reached that point where it looks quite possibly that a tragedy could have been averted if emergency medical services were more closely available at the Bonavista Hospital.
But Gosselin says she's certain.
100%. I really do believe that his death was needless, that he would still be here with us because he would have gotten the oxygen and the medication that he needed to open up his airways fully and to be able to function again. I fully believe that with the Bonavista Hospital open, my dad would still be here with us today.
Gosselin says she wants answers and action, starting with the provincial government and Eastern Health. Daryl Roberts, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, CBC News has reached out to Eastern Health for comment on that story, but has not yet heard back. Well, staying with health news, new numbers show ER deaths in some parts of Atlantic Canada have reached a 5-year high. 326 people died in emergency departments in Newfoundland and Labrador last year. That's up from 262 in each of the 2 previous years. That's an increase of 25%. Nova Scotia also saw a 5-year high in emergency room deaths last year.
Well, the cold streak continues for a good, well, pretty much all of the province. The reason for that, again, sitting under this nice big Arctic ridge of high pressure, keeping things relatively quiet. Now, we did see a few flurries in some areas, but there is all of that Arctic air, and it's going to stick around for a little while longer. We still have an extreme cold warning in place for the northern peninsula, Green Bay, White Bay, Deer Lake, the interior, and Grand Falls, Windsor. And we will see that generally continue just through tonight. You're still looking at your wind chills into the minus 30s, minus 30 to minus 36 it looks like. But look at what happens as we finish out the week and head into the weekend. By the end of Sunday, it looks like, and then into the beginning of next week, we start to see the greens as our temperatures. And that means we're going to be hovering around the 0 degree mark and maybe even a little bit above that. I will break down the full forecast for you coming up.
Thanks, Ashley. Well, there's a snowmobile fatality to tell you about tonight, and police are suggesting alcohol and aggressive driving may have played a role in that crash. It happened Saturday night on the Northern Peninsula. A 39-year-old man is dead after the machine he was driving went off a trail and over an embankment near Trout Pond. He died at the scene, and police say the heavily damaged machine was found quite a distance away from the crash site. Well, now to Corner Brook, where an RCMP officer is facing a number of criminal charges, including possession of cocaine for the purpose of trafficking. The RCMP received an allegation that one of its officers was involved in criminal activity. Police then notified CERT, the province's police oversight agency. Constable Michael Han was arrested in June, and a CERT investigation has been ongoing ever since. Han is expected to appear in court in April, where he'll face additional charges of breach of trust and unauthorized use of a computer. Several city-owned facilities in St. John's are getting a boost thanks to funding from provincial and federal governments. More than $4.2 million will go to improving energy efficiency and converting buildings from oil to electricity. Improvements will be made at the City Depot and the St. John's Animal Shelter, Buckmaster Circle Center, and the Works, to name a few. It's expected that the city will cut back on 232,000 liters of oil each year, reducing emissions by 672 tons annually.
There's a significant number of projects, 17 city buildings included in that. So it's work that's going to have a payback for us, as explained, and we're looking forward to having it done.
Well, don't just stand there with your mouth open catching flies gawking at me like some kind of big gormless galoot. Here, start filling up your blue bag with recyclables.
Well, how is that for motivation? The MMSB has recruited Marg Delahunty, Princess Warrior, to help push the message. In a new ad campaign, Marge takes people on a journey to find out what really happens to recyclables once they leave the curb. More than 19 million pounds of recyclable material is processed in the province each year, but the Multi-Materials Stewardship Board believes it could be more.
I mean, as you see behind me, we've got lots of products here, whether it be cardboard or plastics or aluminum. Those products need to be recycled and can have another life after we utilize it. So that's the important piece that I'd like to pass on to people, that most things that we utilize each and every day can be recycled, and that's as much as we can do personally for the environment.
Well, shifting to sports, young hockey referees in the province are sporting a new color. They've traded in their red armbands for green. It's part of a national initiative to curb verbal abuse. Here now's Troy Turner has the details from Corner Brook.
You'll hear it in every rink in the province. Parents, coaches, or players screaming at referees on the ice. Very few think about the officials, and that under those black and white stripes is someone's child.
The abuse now is in phrases, in comments, and some of the phrases that are being used are just derogatory and they're just not socially accepted. When I was a young official, you get called some ugly stuff in the rink. Now they're not allowing that to do it. Society is not going to allow that to happen anymore.
Hockey Newfoundland and Labrador is introducing green armbands to combat that abuse. They are meant to show those watching that there's a teenager calling the game, and that people should stop and think before speaking.
Once they get it, once the parent or the fan understands what it is the program is, it's almost immediately that's not a bad idea. Maybe we will give it a second thought before we have that vocalization of a call that should have been made or a bad call or whatever they may call it.
It helps eliminate all of the abuse that officials have been taking within the past few years, and it did get out of hand, and this year helps it quite a bit. I haven't had nothing said to me this year with the green armbands, opposed to last year with the rest of it.
There's an issue with retention among hockey officials. Keeping those young officials interested in the sport is a battle when there's verbal abuse.
I feel like I'm a part of the game, and I like in the moment, and I like everything. It's I like making the calls because it shows that I'm in the game, and I just like hockey too.
Officials like Nick Austin and Aidan Sansom know there will also be reaction from those watching the games. But they say this program is a step in the right direction.
I think it's a great idea because as an official, coaches, they might say some words, but when they look at the green armband, they know, okay, he's a junior ref, he might be still learning, and just take it easy on him and be respectful. And I find it's a really good idea because I know that I'm not going to get anything said to me because I got the green armband on, and it's just gives me more confidence as a ref.
Ed Flood says the game has evolved over the years and changes are needed.
Society is totally different, even to a point where Hockey Canada has created their own rule for maltreatment. So yeah, it's still a bit tough. It's an emotional game, as everybody knows, but I think society now is asking, let's hold our emotions in check a little longer, so that our kids, male, female, and officials and players can really enjoy themselves out there.
HNL hopes to have the green armbands distributed to all hockey associations in the province by Easter week, when the provincials are played. Troy Turner, CBC News, Corner Brook.
That's the sound of a hockey puck, something essential in blind hockey that they're playing here in Paradise. We'll tell you about this sport, this all-inclusive sport, coming up.
Well, temperatures have not been above -10 for a number of days in St. John's. We'll talk about how long that's been happening and what's coming up.
This weather update is brought to you by the Healthcare Foundation Home Lottery. VIP prize deadline is midnight March 10th. Order tickets now at hcfhomelottery.ca.
And the cold continues. How much
Sure does.
longer are we going to have to deal with it?
I think people are done.
I kind of am, yeah.
I'm getting that sense just even from people in the newsroom. They're like, Ashley, seriously, when is this over? Because I'm over it.
Yeah. It's hard going out for a walk.
Yeah, I
and
understand.
The dogs don't like it.
Having lived in the north, to me, this is this is what I was used to. And then I came to St. John's and it was nice and warm.
Yeah, we're not as tough as the folks in Labrador who've been dealing with this all winter.
No, for sure. And that's okay. But we do have an end in sight. I can tell you that. But there's a couple of stats that I want to share with you as to what has happened over the last couple of days. Let's take a look at the daytime highs today. We'll start there. -10 in St. John's. And then again, those temperatures along the south coast, southern areas of the island, and even in Stephenville, up above zero. Badger, Deer Lake, or sorry, not up above zero, up above about -8. And then -8 for Badger and Deer Lake as well. You sat around -9. Otherwise, the rest of us are still below -10. In fact, temperatures up across Labrador are nearing about -19 in Makkovik today. So where do we stand? Well, because we sat around -10 today in St. John's, that means we are tied for the 5-day streak that happened last in 1972. The longest is 6 days. Just looking at the forecast for tomorrow, I don't think we'll reach that. So we will tie at this point with 1972. Now, how many hours have we been at -10 or below? We're at third place right now, 121 hours consecutively have we been either at -10 or below there. And then to make it into that, we have into second rather, we have to go above 140 hours. So at some point tomorrow, we should go above that. It's about -9 should be the high tomorrow. So we'll see how close we get to that second place there. I don't know that many of us want to get to the second place, but anyway, those are the stats. So it certainly has not happened in a very long time as far as these cold temperatures are concerned, for St. John's anyway, the Avalon. I know that we have seen stretches of cold weather across parts of the province, parts of the island rather, and certainly up across Labrador. These are your normal temperatures, and this is where you're sitting right now. So -13 in Happy Valley, Goose Bay, -19 with that wind chill. Wind chills not quite as significant as they have been, in fact, across the island, which actually feels much nicer. But as we head through the night tonight, still under that extreme cold warning. Northern Peninsula, Green Bay, White Bay, the interior, again, Grand Falls, Windsor. So your temperatures tonight are going to be dipping into the -20s, but your wind chills are still expected to be fairly chilly. Otherwise, teens for pretty much the rest of the island, and up across Labrador, your temperatures will be into the -20s overnight. So here's a look at the wind chill outlook. Where you were in that extreme cold warning, expect those wind chills somewhere between -30 and -36. Otherwise into the -20s across the island. Some may reach the -30s, and then up across Labrador, extreme cold warnings are over for you, but your wind chills are still into the -30s and -36. Now, the wind chill criteria, the extreme cold criteria, is much colder for Labrador, which is why even though you're experiencing the same wind chills, you're not under a warning. As far as what's going on right now, we do have some snow that will work its way across the maritime provinces. Not a whole lot happening across the island. We do have some flurries still happening, onshore flurries anyway, along the west coast, and we saw a few across the Avalon today as well. Nothing really too much in the way of accumulation as we head through the overnight. We're still very much sitting under that ridge of high pressure, but we will see some more cloud cover move in tomorrow. Winds are going to be a bit brisk as well, with gusts between 40 to as high as 60 kilometers per hour. So it is going to feel a bit colder. But those clouds will be on the increase as the day goes on. And again, we may see a few flurries in the mix, especially areas in onshore. So potentially from Gander through to the Avalon as we head through tomorrow. And then other than that, not a whole lot to talk about. Temperatures should reach about -9 in St. John's, which will likely feel nice. But those northwesterlies will be gusting upwards of 50 kilometers per hour. Now, as we head towards central, Going to stay somewhere between -9 and -10. Along the south coast and Harbor Breton, you'll be sitting around -7 tomorrow. And then minus single digits the story again for the west coast. Humber Valley, though, you'll hover around -10. Northern Peninsula, you will also be into the minus single digits. And then up across Labrador, temperatures generally between -10 and -19. You'll see some flurries move in for Lab City, but lots of sunshine still in place for Nain as your temperatures hover around -20. Now, like I said, the trend is going to be warming up, and we should reach above zero by the time we get into next week, but I'll get into all the details coming up.
Well, if you think about blind hockey and you're someone who can see, you might think that's not going to end up very well. Well, actually, it seems to be working quite well here in Paradise. Joining me now is Steve Joy. You've brought the sport here to Newfoundland. Explain how you did this and why.
So 6 years ago, my son was deemed legally blind. He'd played hockey all his life. I played hockey all my life. For Brandon, he grew up in with CBR minor hockey. He played hockey. Well, he still played hockey until he was 17 years old with CBR. But at the age of 13, he was deemed legally blind and was invited to go to a Canadian blind hockey camp in Vancouver one summer. So, I mean, to us at the time, I'd never heard tell of it, and couldn't help but to think, you know, what in the world is blind hockey and how is it possible? So we talked about it and we said, you know what, let's do it. And we decided to buy the tickets and fly to Vancouver and check out blind hockey. You know, hockey was something that Brandon had always played, and it was something that he didn't want to have to stop because he was visually impaired. So when we heard about this, we thought, well, this is fantastic. You know, it's still a way for Brandon to be able to get on the ice and to enjoy himself. So we went up to Vancouver. We met some fantastic people up there. You know, people that were completely blind, and to see them out playing hockey, it was just amazing to actually see it.
And you must have thought, you know, blades, people can't see, stick swinging. Like, weren't you worried for your son?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the thought of, you know, 10 to 12 players on the ice with all seeing less than 10%, it kind of makes you think, like, do I want to send my 13-year-old out on the ice for this? But you know something? It's almost like second nature. These guys and girls go out on the ice, and they play the game just like everybody else.
You mentioned Brandon was 13. Now Brandon is 19, and he happens to be right here, so I'll just ask him a couple questions. So, Brandon, can you explain blind hockey? Because I know the puck is different.
Yeah, so the puck is different. It's larger, made out of metal, and it's got ball bearings, so it's very audible, so the players can hear it.
It sounds like a cowbell.
Yeah, it definitely does. And the net is 1 foot shorter. So I guess you can't roof it on the goalies. And before you go past the attacking blue line, you have to make one pass. Or sorry, after the blue line, you have to make a pass. And then there's a little whistle blown just so that the players know that there can be a goal scored. But other than that, it's not really different than normal hockey at all.
How do you feel about the fact that your dad decided he wanted you to play, and now it seems that he's brought this for other people who can't see or who can hardly see play the sport?
I think it's awesome, honestly, because I was given this opportunity to play the sport that I've grown up loving, and now that we're able to give it to so many other children, this opportunity, it just feels amazing.
If it's not too personal, how much can you actually see?
It's not, I can't get it down to like a certain amount, but I have very little peripheral vision, or none at all almost. So I have central vision, which is all right, but I can't even see like my hand right here now. Like I have tunnel vision, so no peripheral vision at all, and my night vision is non-existent. I can't see at all when it's dark.
Were you worried when you were going to play blind hockey with a lot of other blind people that you might get hurt?
I wasn't too worried. I understand where that idea comes from, because like obviously it was something that I thought about, but I wasn't like too worried about it.
How do you feel when you see other people, I guess that's the right way to say it, when you see other people play the sport who you know can't see very well, who are like you?
It feels great because I know that the sport is growing and that more people are having this awesome opportunity.
Steve, Obviously, you got some people out here today. There's some first-timers trying to give it a whirl. I like this Islanders thing, by the way. This is very, very clever. How'd you come up with it?
That logo was actually, the name actually came from Brandon. He came up with the name. I sat down with a pen and piece of paper to come up with the logo. It came together pretty quick. So.
Last question for you. Why is it important to include people with disabilities, visual disabilities? I know there's people with other disabilities here. Why did you think it was important to make it possible for them to come to a rink like this and play this sport, our national sport?
You know something, to me it was always about how many kids, when we got to Vancouver, it's all I kept thinking about was how many kids are home in Newfoundland that would love to play hockey. I know I grew up with it, and my father grew up with it. To have a kid sitting at home that was visually impaired, and because they couldn't go play with regular sighted kids, I thought, you know what, we've got to be able to give the opportunity to everybody, and that's where it was for me. Just because a kid is visually impaired doesn't mean they can't try something, and that's what this is all about.
It's just unfathomable that this would be happening.
Her father died in the back of an ambulance while being transported to an out-of-town hospital. The emergency room near his home was closed, and the nearest hospital was a 90-minute drive away. More on that story next. Now back to our top story. The daughter of a man who died earlier this week says her father would still be alive today if the emergency room in Bonavista had been open. On Sunday, 78-year-old Charles Marsh had an asthma attack and drove himself to emergency only to find it closed. The next morning, he called an ambulance. But during the 90-minute drive to the Clarenville Hospital, something went wrong and he died.
I talked to him after he went to the Emerge to the Bonavista Hospital, and he was telling me that it was just terrible how there's no services, that for 4 or 5 days the Emerge was closed. So anybody that was sick had to go to Clarenville to be seen. And he talked about, how some of the other situations that are going on and the stories that are coming out of this. It's just incredible. And he said, "My dear, somebody is going to die over this." Never an inkling that he would be the one. I'm a nurse myself, and I was floored. I was shocked that, he was on an ambulance with oxygen and passed away. And the fact that if he could have had the treatment the day before, which he had about a month ago, he went to the Bonavista Hospital, and the doctor that was on at the time kept him there for an extended period of time to treat him with oxygen masks and steroids. And he walked in with much difficulty breathing and walked out like a new man. And he said that was a wonderful, wonderful treatment. It did a miracle. And he was there for like maybe an hour and a half, and he got the medical help that he needed. But on last Sunday, they were closed. It's unbelievable that we have a hospital with equipment that we cannot open the doors and serve the population. Bonavista Hospital serves a population of 8,100 people with 38 surrounding communities. And our government and Eastern Health cannot find the staff to bring in to take care of these people, that they are forced to get an ambulance, or in many cases, take their own car, or have somebody drive them to another hospital an hour and a half away. That, by the way, is becoming more and more overloaded with all of these extra patients as well. It's just unfathomable that this would be happening. Bonavista has had a hospital for all of my life, and we've always had coverage up until this past year. It's just been incredible. But we will be speaking up. We'll continue to speak up, and this will not go, without being addressed with the people that are responsible. Eastern Health, the Newfoundland and Labrador government, they are responsible for the Bonavista Emerge not being open. And I truly believe that my dad would be here today if it had been.
Well, and she says this situation will be addressed tomorrow evening at a public meeting scheduled for 7 p.m. at the high school in Bonavista. She hopes residents will come out to discuss access to emergency health care in the Bonavista area. Well, there's more reaction tonight to the obstetrics story out of central Newfoundland. A report that maps out the future of healthcare urges government to have only one unit for the entire region, but the health minister says he reviewed the births in the area and has decided to keep units open in Grand Falls, Windsor and Gander. That news is welcomed by Chelsea Earle and Tyler Wicks. They live about 90 minutes from Gander and Badgers Key and say their medical experience last summer is proof government is making the right decision.
We thought I was in labor actually when just before he was born, so we went to Grand Falls and was in there for a week to the day, And when we came home, that same day we came home that night, I went into labor and we had to turn around and drive all the way back, 2.5 hours. We did stop in Gander because I didn't think I was going to make it to Grand Falls. And while being in Gander, that was a horrible experience in Gander. Then I was transferred to Grand Falls and we had our little baby here. There was no OB services. There was, they had no medication for me. I was surprised they even had a bed to put him into if he had to have been born. And there was a bunch of nurses there and an ER doctor, but the ER doctor had told Tyler that he didn't remember the last time he delivered a baby. So that was a little bit nerve-wracking. And the nurses, pretty much the only thing they could tell me to do was just keep breathing. There was no support really. Like there was support because they were there, but because there was no OB services, there was no support that should have been there. It was actually quite scary, to be honest, because I looked at it in the sense of if something had to happen to me or Grayson, like there was absolutely nothing there for us. Nobody would have been able to help us, really. And it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders, and it was a relief because we do want to have another one. And my fear was like, I was second guessing having another one, to be honest, with having to go 2.5 hours away. And I know Gander is still an hour and a half away, but it is closer. It's more convenient for people in our area, really. Well, having it back in Gander, along with myself and other women that are pregnant or plan on becoming pregnant, is probably a lot more relieving to them, to be honest. It's to knowing that you don't have to drive that 2.5 hours. And like I said before, yes, you have to drive that hour and a half. But it is less time and you have a better chance of making it to the hospital than what you do for a 2.5 hour drive.
Fisheries and Oceans Canada has signed a 3-year deal to charter fishing boats for science surveys off the East Coast. It's in response to growing frustration in the fishing industry over DFO's inability to deliver critical data used to set quotas. The CBC's Paul Withers has this report from Halifax.
The fishing vessel Mersey Venture in heavy seas earlier this year, hauling redfish, not for the company, but for the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, which chartered the ship for a special project, a rare winter science survey.
The crew was super generous and open to accommodate us and try to help us out to make everything work. Then, after 1 or 2 days, we kind of forgot that it was maybe not as ergonomic as our typical research survey.
Trips like this allow scientists to estimate the abundance and distribution of fish species throughout Atlantic Canada. But lately, Coast Guard vessels have been unable to make these trips on a regular basis.
We're been distressed in the fishing industry for 2 or 3 years now because DFO's research vessel surveys were not getting done.
Bruce Chapman says the missing data is critical to setting quotas.
We have vessels and crews that depend on it. We have communities on shore that depend on it. It's unacceptable not to have that information in the 21st century.
Canada spent about $500 million on 2 new offshore fisheries science vessels stationed on the East Coast, but their entry into service has been slowed by breakdowns, unplanned maintenance, and refits on both new and old fisheries science vessels. That's where the Mersey Venture and other fishing boats come in. An agreement announced last week allows DFO to charter fishing vessels for up to 6 weeks a year for fisheries or ecosystem surveys in Atlantic Canada. The first mission under the deal occurred this month when the Venture took DFO scientists to Georges Bank off southern Nova Scotia. The 40-year-old Canadian Coast Guard ship scheduled for the job was deemed too decrepit to justify yet another refit to keep it at sea.
We've asked them to have a contingency for their plans. And so if a vessel for unexplained, unanticipated reasons is no longer available for a given survey, give us a call.
Caroline Sene says her mission was a complete success.
really allow us to answer specific questions regarding redfish and the whole community distribution in winter.
Meanwhile, Bruce Chapman would not disclose the cost of the charter agreement other than to say it would be more than $1 million. DFO refused to answer any questions at all. Paul Withers, CBC News, Halifax.
Warmer weather is coming. There's a lot of uncertainty on what that means for our communities and for our culture, so it is very scary.
In northern Labrador communities such as Nain, people are worried about the changing climate and how a part of nature they rely on is slowly disappearing.
Now to a special Here and Now series that looks at our changing climate and the change it's forcing on some communities. Winter sea ice is melting away from Labrador, and from Nain to Rigolet, people believe it's threatening to take away their traditional way of life. The CBC's Malone Mullen spent some time in northern Labrador, and this is the first in her three-part series.
Nain, the northernmost community in Newfoundland and Labrador.
and the largest Inuit settlement along the province's north coast. It's the dead of winter. For Inuit, that means sea ice, and sea ice means freedom. It used to be that every November, the ocean would turn from blue to white. Each day, the layer of ice thickens. By December, the ice is a flat highway. Locals can venture further afield, able to hunt and fish, find wood to stay warm. But these days, the wait for the ice stretches on. This year, it's January before the ocean freezes enough to even walk on.
You look scared. I am. Yeah. I am very scared. The regular for us is we spend about 8 to 9 months in cold weather and then about 3 to 4 months in the summer. And so like a lot of our culture and our livelihood is tied to these cold temperatures, and also a lot of our biodiversity, our wildlife, the things that we depend on for sustenance and for food, they also depend on cold weathers. And you know, this warmer weather is coming. There's a lot of uncertainty on what that means for our communities and for our culture, so it is very scary.
There's no stopping what's happening here. All the latest gadgets, data, and drone footage can't return the North Coast to the temperatures it once experienced. Climate change is hitting Labrador hard. It's getting warmer. By some accounts, average temperatures will rise by up to 12 degrees by the end of this century. And there's nothing anyone can do to reverse it.
That's also like one of my fears as well, because I am a mom and I do want my daughter to have those aspects of my culture grown into her life, and so it's like the uncertainty is real and it's terrifying.
As the environment here changes, it's forcing the people to change along with it. Rex Hallwell Jr. heads an Inuit-owned company that uses digital technology to tell people whether the ice is thick enough to travel on. In this new world of unpredictable weather, this app is now essential for keeping them safe.
Smart Ice was founded because what happened was that we had, in 2009 and 2010, we had rain in January here in Nain. Today it's minus 41 with the wind chill. And that's what it's supposed to be, but back then, we had rain, so it was in the plus. So we were seeing the effects of climate change. So what happened was people were concerned about the climate that was changing, and it was impacting our traditional way of life. So we weren't able to, travel safely on ice because, people were falling through the ice, and they were unsure of their travel routes.
It's called Smart Ice, and it's helping 24 northern communities across Canada. That number growing. They deploy buoys, long tubes that measure water and ice temperatures to tell how thick the ice is, and then relay that data to an app that residents can check before they travel. The company has also created a smart homotic, or sled, that operators can tow behind a snowmobile, checking ice thickness in remote areas in real time.
Not traveling on the sea ice, that's one of the biggest things of our culture. People say it's a part of our culture. It's not a part of our culture. It is our culture to travel on the sea ice. So, in 20, 30 years, when people can't travel on the sea ice, that's going to be the loss of our culture. And when people think of Inuit, they think of people traveling on the sea ice. So that whole loss of the sea ice and the ability of traveling on it, that's going to be a loss of our culture.
But the struggle to hang on to traditions that date back hundreds, if not thousands of years in an isolated subpolar community comes with hurdles. Here, a cable broke as Hallwell was trying to train a new group of operators. He might not get another one in the mail for weeks.
It is haunting me, but really, the only thing that we can do now is try to come up with more tools like we have with Smart Ice to monitor the sea ice, to ensure when people are traveling on the sea ice that they're safe, and they can do it for longer periods of time to keep their culture alive. And really, that's the only thing. Like, we've always, we've always adapted to living in the north. It's just now we have to face a new way of adapting to living in the north where it's going to be loss of our culture, it's going to be loss of the sea ice.
Without creative solutions like smart ice, Inuit here would face the dissolution of an ancient culture. Derek Pottle lives in Rigolet. Hunting, fishing, trapping is his identity.
The land and the sea is who I am. It's what keeps me alive. It's my heartbeat. It keeps me healthy. It keeps me grounded.
South of Nain, thin ice. Trapping residents in their communities. They can't hunt or get wood to heat their homes.
If it keeps going the way that it's going now, we may not even have a winter like what we're so used to having, and that's, if we see the continuation of what we've been seeing in the last 15 years or so, for the next 15 years, we could see some major, major changes. And if you listen to everything that's being put out there by the so-called experts, if we all stop, the whole world today stop using fossil fuel, we're not stopping this trend. My generation could be the last generation that knows this lifestyle, and that's scary when you take, a culture's identity away from.
But the land is changing. For the people on the coast, the change they're forced to live with isn't fair.
The Inuit population, we're a very small population, and we're probably some of the people who don't contribute a whole lot to climate change, but we're going to be some of the first people who are going to be very, very, very affected by climate change with the loss of our sea ice and the loss of our culture.
For many here in Nain, it's all about adaptation. But while they know big changes are coming, it's impossible to predict how it'll all play out and affect the future of the Inuit way of life. Malone Mullen, CBC News, Nain, Labrador.
Well, there's a lot more to this story, as you can imagine. We'll have part 2 in Malone's series next Tuesday as we continue our look at how the changing climate is changing northern Labrador.
Well, our French language colleagues with Radio Canada's regional morning show, Le Réveil, will be live from St. John's this Thursday and Friday. They're hosting the show from Bannerman Brewery on Duckworth Street, and they're looking for a live studio audience. So anyone free between 7:30 and 9:30 a.m., there will be lots of interesting guests, plus music from Adrian House. And if you can't make it in person, you can tune in on 105.9 FM in the St. John's area, 94.3 FM on the Port-a-Port. Okay, so now for a look at the long-range forecast, get to see what's happening later in the week and when things are going to start to turn around a little bit temperature-wise.
Thaw out.
A little bit.
Get out of the deep freeze. We're not going to thaw out because temperatures are still going to be below zero, but they're not going to be as cold as they have been for the last 5 days across a good chunk of the province. So let's take a look at what's going to happen as we head into Wednesday evening and Thursday morning. So that area of low pressure offshore is getting pretty close to coastal areas of Labrador, and that means we will see the potential for some flurries. It looks like at this point could pick up between 2 to 5 centimeters, and also the potential for some flurries for the west coast of the island as we head into the evening hours on Thursday. Temperatures will start to moderate a little bit, more seasonable where we should be sitting this time of year, between -4 and -6 across the island, even across Labrador, getting into some of that milder air as well. -7 in both Lab City, Happy Valley, Goose Bay, and then towards the coast, still hovering around -10, but again, you're going to see that potential for some flurries through the day. Otherwise, some sunshine across the island, so these temperatures are certainly going to feel pretty nice through the day. And as we head into Friday, we're going to continue to see those temperatures climbing ever so slowly, but they will between -4 and -5 across the island. Temperatures still sitting in the minus single digits from Happy Valley, Goose Bay through to Cartwright. And then Lab City, you're going to sit around -14 through the day. And again, some flurries will still stick around up across northern areas of Labrador. Otherwise, sunshine the story. However, we may see some flurries again for Friday along the south coast of the island. This shouldn't accumulate too much, but there is still certainly that chance. -4 will be the daytime high in Marystown. Now, if we look at the long-range forecast, temperatures will still be into the minus single digits. Overnight lows there as well. I don't really see anything in the forecast as far as weather is concerned until we get into Sunday, it looks like at this point. And this should be the continuation. We should continue to see the temperatures climbing and potentially even up above zero as we head into next week. Now, for central and western Newfoundland, you're looking at that flurry activity again on Sunday. But up until we get there, looking pretty nice. In fact, between -2 and -4 for central and about -4, -6 across western Newfoundland. Now, for eastern Labrador, flurries will start for you on Saturday, continue into Sunday, and look at that warm up there to -3 by the time we get into Sunday. And then a little bit of a roller coaster for western Labrador, -teens for Friday, Saturday, and then back up to -8 on Sunday. Now, just before we leave you, another absolutely gorgeous northern light. This was again last night. Ryan shared this shot. Nope, that might be wrong. I may have forgot to change that. But thank you so much for that. If you have any weather photos that you would like to share with us, send them to Facebook, Twitter, or email them to nlphotos@cbc.ca.
Oh, just gorgeous. Love it. Thank you so much. That's it for us this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.
Good night.